Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from design companies like Vint that helps wineries tell their story through visual design, to today's guest, Josh Jacobs, who's enabling alcohol brands to sell directly to consumers while staying compliant with the 3-tier system. Today's episode, it's sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, if you're a business looking to retain a winery or craft beverage producer as a client, Barrels Ahead will figure out a plan to make it happen. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Now, before I introduce today's guests, I want to give a big thank you to last week's guests, Carlton Fowler and James Pellegrini of Goat Rodeo Capital. On last week's show, Carlton and James, they gave some great advice for startups seeking capital funding. If you're a startup and you're looking for funding, check out that episode to learn when the right time is to start seeking capital. Well, this week, we keep the startup momentum going with Speakeasy, who's revolutionizing direct-to-consumer alcohol sales. I'm super excited today to talk with Josh Jacobs, co-founder and CEO of Speakeasy Co. Speakeasy is an e-commerce and fulfillment platform that was built specifically for the highly regulated alcohol industry. Today, Speakeasy powers over 240 brands, including national players such as Whistle Pig, and was also behind the launch of Tesla Tequila. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. So, Josh, your background's not in the wine and spirits industry. It's in math, right? Mathematics.
Yeah, mathematical business major, actually. And over the course of my career, I've dabbled in a number of entrepreneurial endeavors, from online moving to art to fashion, and slowly found my way into the alcohol industry while simultaneously holding a corporate job until relatively recently.
Oh, that's amazing. So what is it that excites you about being an entrepreneur?
It's a good question, Drew. And really, it dates back to my first taste of entrepreneurism. Back in college, I was a little frustrated by the internship opportunities. Most of them were fluffy resume builders. And I was looking at the incredible talent pool at Wake Forest University saying, we have some of the brightest minds that are looking to actually drive value. Or is there an opportunity to create a staffing organization intentionally seeking very specifically skilled college majors and see if we can place them for project-based work or actual continuous-based work, as opposed to coming in for a summer and checking off a few boxes to make sure you laddered up for the next internship.
Oh, that's amazing. So with each entrepreneurial venture, so you went from the staffing to fashion? Well, tell me about the fashion part. I want to get into alcohol, but you're piquing my interest here.
Sure. Yeah. So the first taste was with staffing. And my co-founder at the time, one of my best friends, absolutely were enamored with the idea. However, once we both got full-time offers, me at IBM and my co-founder, he was given a full-time offer at an investment bank. It was a little difficult at that point to turn down the dollar signs. So we shut down the first startup, but I always had an affinity towards entrepreneurism thereafter. And the next startup was spawned after a move a few years after graduation, a really terrible moving experience. I think everyone has had one personally, or at least knows one secondhand, where virtually the movers held our goods hostage. And we said, there's got to be more transparency in this industry. So we strive to create Uber for the moving industry. And that was the first foray into a tech startup, and made every single mistake you possibly could in the books. First, and probably the most important lesson that I learned then, was you need to be in an industry you're passionate about. To have a successful startup, you pour every ounce of your effort and blood, sweat, and tears into the business. And moving was not my passion. I don't think a lot of people could say that it is, which is probably why it's so antiquated and ripe for being disrupted, but has really struggled to be brought into the modern time. So shut that down. And for fashion, that actually goes back to my wedding. I wanted to get a custom suit made and paid an absolute arm and a leg for it. But when I put that custom suit on for the first time, it fit like a glove. And I felt like a boss. And I said, if I can afford custom suits, this is what I want. But no way could I afford another one anytime soon. But not long thereafter, for our honeymoon, my wife and I were vacationing in Vietnam, unbeknownst to us, the tailoring capital of the world. And I got a custom suit made for, I kid you not, 1/15 the price of in the US. Oh. And I liked it even more. And I said, this has to be a business. Let's import custom suits from overseas. And so that was the fashion startup. We were actually working with a technology based in Israel where you could take a couple photos of yourself and it would extract your measurements. We'd send them. Then we were working with a manufacturer in China, and they would put together these unbelievable custom suits where you could choose everything from the thread on the buttons to the button itself. So it was really, really fun startup. And I think there's a ton of potential there. But at that time, Speakeasy actually started taking off and really devoted my full time and attention.
Oh, that's a great story. So with the moving company, you learned the lesson learned there was that it's not so much that you identify a problem that needs to be fixed, but you also have to have a passion to continue once that problem's been solved.
One of many lessons learned, Drew. Yep.
And then fashion. So what brought you into the alcohol industry?
Back in 2015, we were seeing a couple major trends. First, it was the rise of the subscription boxes. Blue Apron, Birchbox were two really inspirational companies for us. And Drew, are you familiar with Birchbox and Blue Apron?
Blue Apron, I'm very familiar. We've been members for we haven't been members for last year, but we were solid for 3 years. We had a stack about 2 inches thick of all the recipes that we used. But yes, big fans of Blue Apron. I was members for years, had a 2-inch stack of recipes at one time.
Great, absolutely. And so, Blue Apron, and for those that are unfamiliar with it, they're democratizing something as intimidating as whipping up a gourmet meal at home, making it very simple, sending you everything you need. And then the other inspirational startup, Birchbox. They're taking something as unapproachable as sampling in the beauty industry, which is so expensive, and they send you these sample sizes at a very affordable rate. And the whole idea is sample to full size. You sample different things you like, and then you purchase the full size of the products that you do. And I was looking for the intersection of these two startups. What is a really intimidating industry, however, has this e-commerce component? That was something that I thought Blue Apron was missing back in 2015. You just had this subscription box. There was no opportunity to reorder cooking supplies or ingredients, etc. So I was looking for the intersection of these two startups. And simultaneously in 2015, we were also experiencing the craft cocktail boom. Craft cocktails were becoming an integral facet of restaurant menus across the country. Dedicated craft cocktail bars were popping up. And I realized virtually no one that I knew had the capabilities or the tools, ingredients to whip up gourmet cocktails at home. Very similar to Blue Apron. There was a gap. There was also no centralized location to fill this gap. So we thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is our opportunity. And so we thought to ourselves, let's put together a craft cocktail subscription box.
So that was the seeds of Speakeasy. Started as a craft cocktail subscription. Now, what was your first offering? Your first cocktail?
Yeah, back in 2015, we were working with Liberty Call Distilling. They're actually a partner live on our platform, and we'll walk through the evolution of how we went from a subscription box to a direct-to-consumer platform. But we were working with a lot of the local San Diego distilleries in our backyard. We, as we talked about, did not have a background in the alcohol industry. And so for us, it was just about knocking on doors and trying to introduce ourselves to those that were close by. And the distilleries were the ones originally educating us on the three-tier system and how handcuffed they are by the existing regulatory landscape. And so they were the ones opening up our eyes to the broader industry, making introductions. But ultimately, what they were communicating was our subscription box was the best marketing vehicle that existed in the industry. And our minds were blown. They wanted to give us free product. They wanted to work with us. They wanted to introduce us to their friends. And Drew, we didn't know what exactly, but we knew there was something there. Something, if we could just figure out a way to continue supporting the distilleries and these craft alcohol brands so stymied by the prohibition era legislation, then we knew that we could have a successful business.
That's amazing. You mentioned the three-tier system is one of the biggest challenges in the alcohol industry, something that you may not have been aware of when you started it. What was some of the, and you guys now have a very unique approach to helping people navigate that and sell direct to consumers. Share with the audience kind of the background on that three-tier system and your unique approach to solving it.
Absolutely. So the foundation of the three-tier system, tier one are the brands, tier two are the distributors that purchase from the brands and sell it to tier three, bars, restaurants, and liquor stores, where we as consumers, for the most part, purchase our product. As you can imagine, if you're brands, you're absolutely reliant upon the second and third tiers for the success of your organization. However, if you look at the size of brands, there are the big household name brands, and then we have these small craft emerging brands as well. And in the middle, you have these distributors. And as you can imagine, they are incentivized and they will only be a profitable, successful business if they focus on the largest brands. And so what happens is a lot of these small emerging craft players do not have a distributor that's focused on building out their business. So they really struggle to get to that third tier, the bars, restaurants, and liquor stores. Putting that to the side for a moment, even if a craft brand works with a distributor effectively and is behind the bar or on a liquor store shelf, there's the fact that there are hundreds, or in a liquor store, thousands of other SKUs competing for the consumer's attention. And the brands are entirely removed from this transaction. They simply have their bottle and label on their shelf or name on a menu, which is just not enough real estate. What we see stepping back out of the alcohol industry, startups tend to launch online. And why is that? That's because they have their social media, their website, their entire digital presence to engage with consumers, to indoctrinate them into the brand, tell their story, and ultimately convert them. However, as we talked about, because of the three-tier system, the alcohol brands cannot just run e-commerce ads and sell to consumers.
Yeah, and that is a throwback to prohibition, where the three-tier system started, where you had to go through a distributor. Now, and I can see with the big brands that it all makes sense, but if you're only doing a couple thousand bottles, you're, like you said, you're not going to be able to get that distribution nationally, and there's probably not a local distributor that's going to be able to distribute that accurately. How did you guys figure out how to navigate this to allow alcohol brands to sell directly to consumers?
Yeah, I'll walk you through, Drew, a series of learnings and iterations that we went through from 2015 to about 2018. So V1 was the subscription box. That was our original concept. We got it off the ground. We started pushing. Going back to one of our original motivations with Birchbox, they had this whole sample to full size component. And so we really wanted to embrace that. So V2, we said, okay, once we've curated this specific box for one of these local craft distilleries, let's provide an e-commerce site for consumers, our subscribers, to reorder the full-size bottle if they enjoyed that spirit. So that was V2. We got our e-commerce store somewhat off the ground. We had something beyond just the subscription boxes, and we were starting to promote and support these craft alcohol brands who were quickly becoming our partners. And V3, we said, well, we have, after 5-6 months, 5-6 SKUs in our e-commerce store. This is not very exciting. Why are we throttling ourselves? Let's build a craft spirit store. So we spent a little bit of time over the course of 2016 building a craft spirit store, maybe got 50, 60 SKUs in there. We went back, as we always did, to our craft partners, and we said, all right, guys, what do you think about our marketplace that we've put together? And they were very frank, as we appreciate, and they've always been to date. And they said, this is no better than Drizzly or Reserve Bar or any other online marketplace that exists today. Perhaps you have a somewhat unique selection, but we as an alcohol brand are not going to invest resources to drive traffic to your website when we have no control over the look, the feel, the design, the pricing, the shipping. At the bottom of our product pages are other products you recommend. So we might be paying. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, to them, it's just another store, another version of the 3-tier system.
It's another store. And if you drive traffic to a marketplace, you might be generating sales for a competitor because other whiskeys or other vodkas or other rums are going to be listed. And there are a lot of distractions because these marketplaces are optimized for conversion, not optimized to convert for the specific brand that drove the traffic there.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So how did you get around that version?
That was a major learning for us when we said, all right, this isn't about a speakeasy marketplace. This is really about the brands. So what we thought ingenious next step was, let's build dedicated landing pages on the Speakeasy website. And to instill more confidence in our partners to drive traffic to our dedicated landing pages, let's hide all the navigation. Let's hide any reference to other brands. Let's remove other products we recommend and provide a canvas for our partners to include messaging and photos about their brand. So they had a mini micro website on our website that they felt a little more confident wasn't going to generate sales for a competitor. And this, Drew, we actually productized. And so in parallel, we had the subscription boxes, we had our marketplace, and now we are starting to sell these dedicated landing pages on our website. And the last learning was when we were talking with a potential partner in 2017, we were selling them our dedicated landing page. And they said, Josh, rather than a micro website on your website, what if you built us an entire website, soup to nuts, from the ground up, where we had access to all the tools, capabilities, and analytics, all the fundamental and essential e-commerce tools for us to grow online, but we leveraged your fulfillment and compliance backend. And that was the eureka moment. The light bulb went off and we said, of course, that makes a lot more sense rather than on our website. If you had complete control of everything on your website, then you could scale faster than ever before.
That is a very logical progression. I see that in a couple other industries. As far as the nuts and bolts of the website, like, is it an equivalent to like a direct to wine website, or is there other things that need to be factored into when you're selling alcohol across state lines?
Yeah, so that first pilot that we put together, we didn't really invest significant energy. And one of my favorite startup principles is the whole lean startup. So we wanted to get off the ground as quickly as possible. We just whipped up a standalone Shopify website. And that initial pilot knocked it out of the park in end of 2017. And we made the tough decision to sunset the subscription boxes to focus entirely on this whole new concept, direct-to-consumer technology and fulfillment platform. And so at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, we built a scalable infrastructure. We didn't want to have hundreds of independent websites that we couldn't manage. We wanted to have this multi-website infrastructure, this true platform that we were building. And so that's what we were able to launch in February of 2018. And the way that it works is we enable our partners to have complete control over their website. And then we build just the e-commerce, just the sharpen cart functionality on our platform. And then we integrate it into our partner's website and we skin it to look and feel just like our partner's website. So there's this really seamless experience. You're on, for example, whistlepig.com and you click shop online, you go to shop.whistlepig.com. So it's still on WhistlePig's greater URL, but it was actually built on our platform. And so if you're on shop.whistlepig.com, you're transacting on our servers. And it's that really seamless experience. A consumer really has no idea. And that's the intention, is we're empowering our brands to have complete control while remaining compliant, because that consumer is actually purchasing from a liquor store through our platform, who's purchased from a distributor, who's purchased from the brand. So we're enabling e-commerce transaction on the brand's website while remaining 3-tier compliant.
Well, that's very creative. So there's still the whole 3-tier system. You're not kind of circumventing the whole thing. You're just I don't want to say this is the right word, but you're hiding the whole 3-tier system from the consumer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're not circumventing by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if the 3-tier system's going to ever go anywhere. It's been here for 88 years now, and perhaps we've seen some restrictions loosening with cocktails to go and some other trends. But absolutely, this is 3-tier compliant. It's just a far more seamless experience for consumers to be able to shop directly or seemingly directly from their favorite brands. And then the brands, the most important piece, they own all of the data. For decades, it's crazy. These brands have been forced to scale in the complete dark. They have no idea who's purchasing their product, what the makeup of that demographic is, what the feedback from their products are. And now all of a sudden, the brands via the Speakeasy platform have control over those customer relationships and truly control over their own destiny. No longer are they reliant upon the 2nd and 3rd tier. Now they can just focus on their own digital presence and scaling online and take control back over.
That's huge. That allows them to completely market and actually understand and create new products based on the customer's desires, because they've got firsthand knowledge now of this buying behavior. Do you have an example or two of that, of how that's kind of panned out?
Yeah. So data and analytics is a major value proposition. And I think there are 2 chief ways in which our partners are leveraging some of that data. Well, I would say 3. So 2 really interesting ones, and then I'll get to the third, probably most valuable and most obvious one. So one interesting one is shortening the innovation cycle. So when you have to flow through the 3 tiers more traditionally, you have to generate and produce significant amount of product, work with distributors, educate them, train them, have them sell to bars, restaurants, and liquor stores, work with the bars, restaurants, and liquor stores through different activations, different sampling events, get consumers to purchase it, and then you see if it's successful. This can take many millions of dollars and many months. However, with e-commerce, you can produce a much smaller sample, send it out to consumers, run ads, sell it very quickly, and then survey them. You know exactly who purchased that product. You can have that conversation with them. You can learn, are they reordering it? Or directly ask them, did you enjoy this product when you own that relationship? And all of a sudden, something that might have taken several years and millions of dollars can be one barrel that you put together in a few short months. So that innovation cycle gets really shortened and condensed with e-commerce. The second really interesting thing that we're seeing is, as we talked about these smaller craft emerging brands, it can be difficult to capture attention of a distributor. And what we're seeing is they're using e-commerce to capture that attention, where previously they had maybe 0 sales in that market. And they were on hands and knees saying, hey, in other markets, we're doing great, pick us up. Where now all of a sudden they can get into that territory via e-commerce and go to the distributor and say, hey, we're crushing it online. What is the best offer you'll make to me? And flip that negotiation upside down. And now multiple distributors might be clamoring for their business. And so that's been really fascinating to see our partners take advantage of the data and also identify which markets to go into. If they're maybe in a handful of states and one market that they didn't realize is huge for e-commerce, well, that's where you need to invest more traditional brick and mortar dollars. And I think that's an important point, Drew, is we're not advocating for 100% e-commerce. We're advocating for a more holistic approach because e-commerce and brick and mortar, they feed off of each other. And we want to ensure that our partners have the highest likelihood of succeeding. And we think that's going to be a major factor. And the third way to use the data is remarketing. So this is probably the most obvious and certainly the most profitable with the data and analytics. Consumer orders your product, make sure to send them an email 45 days later. Hey, you empty? Here's 5% off. Roll out a new product, email that consumer that's ordered something similar in the past. Cart abandonment emails. Hey, someone adds something to cart and then decides not to check out. Hit them with an email, hit them with free shipping. There's a lot of interesting ways that you can leverage that consumer data and really scale your business through tools like MailChimp and Klaviyo and Facebook advertising.
And does Speakeasy help the alcohol, these distilleries with their remarketing efforts, or is this something that you kind of build the system and let them figure out how to do it?
Yeah, Drew, this was something we thought would be interesting at the beginning. But going back to our story, hey, we're 2018, we get our platform off the ground. It was really slow thereafter. It seemed like a genius idea, and right now it seems like a genius idea. But in 2018, it was such a paradigm shift away from the traditional brick and mortar model that only the few brave craft players, the savviest players, jumped on our platform. And even through 2019, we had maybe summer 2019, about 10, 12 partners on our platform. So things were crawling, to say the least. And at that point, we said, this is the future. We know it is in our bones. What can we do to make it happen? And I had another full-time job at the time in corporate America, leveraging my mathematics background in data science. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to step back as much as possible from the day job. And I'm going to line up call after call all day. I'm going to work nights and weekends to make this happen. And by the end of 2019, we were starting to really pick up steam. We had about 40 partners at the end of 2019. Oh. And then what happens March thereafter, last year?
You were queued up perfectly.
We were there screaming from the rooftops about e-commerce when overnight up to 80% of sales for these craft brands evaporated because they're disproportionately reliant upon bars and restaurants as opposed to the more household names. They focus a little bit more on what's called off-premise, which are the liquor stores. And so these brands were forced to find a solution. They were forced to find a new sales channel just to survive the pandemic. And as I mentioned a second ago, we were standing from the rooftops screaming about e-commerce. And so our business just took off at that point. And from last January of 2020 to now, we went from 40 partners to we're over 250 brands at this time. And
that's like one every 3 days.
It was pretty wild. And it still is pretty wild. And we went from my business partner and co-founder, Michael Bowen, he went full-time January. He was employee 1. I went full-time in February. We have 24 full-time that we've added in the last 17 months or so. And we've learned an absolute ton. And going back to your question, going full story here, Drew, you're asking, do we support on the marketing front? And last year, for better half the year, we said the only thing we can focus on is our platform and fulfillment, our core operations. We have so many brands that are relying upon us for the survival of their business. Let's just stay heads down focused on that. And as we got more brands live, we kept getting questions time and time again. Hey, tell us about the unique visibility you have and the data that you have. And my business partner, co-founder, Michael Bowen, he's got a marketing background. So we were starting to offer all these tips and tricks. And we also fortunately brought on some really savvy partners that had their own in-house digital marketing. And they were the ones that took off, while a number of others were not seeing as much success. And so by maybe 3/4 of the way through last year, it became absolutely clear that we had to start offering digital marketing services. And so towards the end of last year, we launched our own digital marketing services where we manage the paid social, Facebook, Instagram, Google AdWords. And we also have our account managers. We call them partner success managers, PSMs. They're growth consultants. And so they have a blueprint of what's successful, what we've seen in the past, and are working with our partners. And you need to have a newsletter. You need to have email capture. You need to have cart abandonment. And so we know all these tips and tricks, and we can help our partners go from 0 sales to 50 sales. And once they have that buy-in, then we can say, hey, you're seeing success. We can turbocharge it and take you from 50 transactions a month to 500 transactions a month. And we have case studies where we've done this. We've taken, for example, Ginger 9, a sour cherry liqueur, very unique product. They were averaging a couple $100s a month in sales when they were the ones owning it themselves. Then Kim, our director of marketing, came in and brought them up to 30,000 a month in sales. And that's huge for a small business, especially such a unique one as a sour cherry liqueur. And so now we're supporting about 12 or 14 partners for digital marketing, and it's one of our fastest growing segments.
I would think so, because a lot of times you build this fantastic platform that has all these capabilities, and a distillery, their core competency isn't configuring cart abandonment emails.
No.
So it makes sense that you would add that as a value add to your site for sure.
We want to be a one-stop shop.
No, that makes sense. So going through, so we're now hopefully on the tail end of COVID, and we've all kind of, California just finally, we're recording this in the middle of June. So California finally just released all the capacity mandates and whatnot. Where do you see your growth growing, and where do you see like the alcohol space going as we kind of emerge in 2021?
Yeah, and emerging we are. I left my condo yesterday or 2 days ago on the 15th for the first time without a mask in a year and a couple months. So we're pretty much on the other side, which is amazing to see. Hopefully,
it is kind of strange. I don't know what to do in the stores right now. Like half the people have the mask, half the people don't. You kind of carry it, not knowing if you need to put it on.
We're in this awkward transition time, that's for sure. And we're in a transition time in the alcohol industry as well. We've had a lot of questions and conversations around what's next. Was the e-commerce spike simply a pandemic trend? But I would say, using the conversations with our partners as a data point, it's become evident that that's not the case. So as I mentioned, March of last year, people came running to us that we've had conversations with previously. And the conversation shifted from, this is interesting, maybe in a year or two, we'll have some more budget, to how quickly can we get live? And at that point, it was about survival. But over the course of our partnership and relationship with a number of these brands, they quickly realized, for example, Ginger 9 started selling $30,000 a month of their sour cherry liqueur. This wasn't a solution to survive the pandemic. It's truly a long-term differentiator to thrive. And the number of case studies, we have partners selling hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. This is not just about a simple solution to survive the pandemic. This is a major sales channel. And it's not just what we're seeing on our end. The IWSR, they're predicting 400% growth in the e-commerce space over the next few years. And probably one of the easiest ways to rationalize the growth that we're expecting is e-commerce alcohol is 2% of overall sales. E-commerce in other industries, 20 to 50% of overall sales. So that 400% growth the IWSR is predicting, likely very conservative. E-commerce is here, and it's here to stay, and it's going to be a major component for brands of all sizes going forward, especially the small and emerging players, because online, it democratizes it. No longer are you reliant upon distributors and bars, restaurants, and liquor stores and billboards and traditional advertisements. With a very small team and intentional spending, perhaps spending with our digital marketing services, you can have a material impact on your business.
That's great. I love the term democratizing it. And I come from the wine side, and we do a lot of work with direct consumer wine sales. And on that side, we saw the same boom during COVID, and it's online wine sales are just, they're here to stay, and they're not getting bigger and bigger every year, just in the statistics that you talked about. And going in with like wine club and membership programs, does Speakeasy offer any of those type of kind of membership type aspects to it, or is it all one-off sales?
Yeah, we get asked all the time, are you going to ever roll back the Speakeasy cocktail subscription? And perhaps at some point, but the next iteration for us is to enable subscriptions for all of our partners that want to offer whiskey clubs or vodka subscriptions or ready to drink partners. Hey, you want to get your 12 pack of seltzers shipped every single month and not have to worry about it, set it and forget it. That's going to be coming out for us in the coming weeks. And as far as we understand, I think we'll be the first e-commerce platform empowering the subscription services
for the alcohol sales. That's amazing.
Yeah.
No, that's a huge, get recurring sales. It's a huge value add. And then to empower each one of your partners or each one of your clients to do it themselves, they can kind of put their own spin on it and make it their own.
Absolutely.
What do you see as the biggest challenges going forward in 2021 and the next few years for the alcohol space?
Great question. And Drew, there's a lot of industry tailwinds around e-commerce. And I think at this point, still, our biggest challenge is not really from competitors, other e-commerce players. It's about awareness. We need to make sure brands are aware that e-commerce is an option and a solution. We need to make sure consumers know that they can shop online from their favorite brands and shop online, period, for alcohol. A lot of people purchase alcohol for the first time online over the pandemic. And our hypothesis is once you've tasted the convenience of delivery to the doorstep for alcohol, as a lot of people have in virtually every other industry, you're not going to go back. And so we're just going to keep pushing awareness of our platform for brands and keep working with our brands to help push general public awareness that they can turn online and shop online.
That's great. What advice, as we're kind of wrapping down here, so what advice would you give someone like a young brand, a new brand that is considering, selling online, obviously going through Speakeasy, but what are some of the other things that they need to take into consideration before kind of just jumping in and getting their product online?
Well, going back to the digital marketing services, so something that has become abundantly clear, there is one black and white differentiator between those that succeed on our platform and those that are not having as much success. And that is having a digital marketer at the helm, a professional digital marketer, and an advertising budget. This is not build it and they will come. And this is something that we've struggled to really convey to our partners. And we have lots of partners come in and they sign up, they get their website live, and they don't see the sales that they're necessarily expecting. And then we just ask them, how many visitors did you have to the website? If you had only a couple of visitors, you can't expect hundreds of transactions. And that's something that we just cannot instill enough, that this is only going to work if you make the proper investments. And we're not saying you have to use Speakeasy to run your digital marketing, but you need to have someone that has that very unique skill set to tinker with the analytics and optimize in Facebook Ads Manager. And you have to have an advertising budget.
That's good. What as far as an advertising budget, what would you propose would be for a startup, a percentage of their sales, or what would be an accurate or a adequate advertising budget?
Yeah, with just a couple $1,000s a month in advertising spend on Facebook, Instagram, Google AdWords, you can start generating some pretty significant sales. You have 3, 4, 5+ ROAS, which is return on advertising spend. So if you're spending a couple thousand, you might be generating 5, 6, maybe up to $10,000 a month in total sales. And then you start reinvesting a portion of that. So month 1, maybe you spend $2,000 in advertising, and then you reinvest some of the profits. In month 2, maybe you bump it up to $2,500, and you keep investing, and all of a sudden this starts snowballing into a pretty significant amount of advertising spend, profitable advertising spend. And what's great is usually the first purchase, you have that acquisition cost, but then you own that customer relationship and you can monetize what's called the LTV, the lifetime value of that consumer. So unlike in a bar, restaurant, or liquor store where every single sale, you're going to have to work just as hard for the next one. Once you have that first e-commerce sale with someone, you own that relationship and you can continue to sell to them the same products, cross-sell, upsell, etc. And so our recommendation is if you can carve out a couple $1,000s a month, even $1,500 a month for advertising spend, then you have enough to start really growing your business online. And when you look at that compared to what a lot of brands invest in brick and mortar and traditional distribution, it's a drop in the bucket. And so it can be a little frustrating when we're talking with partners and we're like, you just got to make this small investment. And for some, they're unwilling to do it. But for those that are, they are really setting themselves up for long-term success.
That's great advice. I love that you mentioned if you build it, they're probably not going to come. You gotta do something. And you also hit on one of the biggest pushbacks that we get too. And there are people like, I don't have $1,000. I don't want to throw $1,000 down the hole or $2,000 down the hole in marketing. And once you point that it's going to lead to a sale. So it's not like you're just throwing out $2,000. You're going to get some sales for it if you do it even marginally correctly. And then having a 3-4 time ROAS, that's fantastic as well, where you keep plowing it back. Great advice.
And what's so cool, Drew, going back to your point about it's not just flushing $1,000 down the toilet and hoping for the best, because that's what traditional distribution often is. If you buy a billboard or you run
print
a print advertisement, you have no idea what happens. What's so amazing about e-commerce is you put $1 in, you see that you got $3 out. You know those customers, you know the click-through rates. There's a ton of analytics behind it. And so you know fairly quickly if it's working. And we've proven with our team that more often than not, it is.
Well, that's great. What challenges? So for someone that's just getting into, they're going to go advertise on Facebook, they just starting from ground up. There are some particular challenges with advertising on Facebook. What are some of the things that people should keep an eye out for, given the fact it is a regulated industry on social?
Yeah, with the regulations, you have to make sure you're targeting consumers that are 21 plus. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be critical to make sure you don't get booted off the different platforms. In terms of advice, this is a tough pill to swallow, but good product, good juice is table stakes. What it comes down to is marketing. Your company will only succeed if you are good at marketing. And most people, they produce an amazing product and they think it's going to sell itself. But I wouldn't say it's saturated in the alcohol space by any stretch of the imagination, but there are thousands of brands. And that means there's a lot of choices for consumers, and they're likely only going to choose yours because of the marketing. Once they've sampled it, they'll keep coming back because of the quality. So quality is table stakes. It really comes to marketing. And what we've learned is alcohol is much more experiential. When you're selling a suit, for example, going back to my business, you put up a picture on Facebook of a beautiful suit. Someone says, I want it. They buy it. You're done. With alcohol, when you have a picture of a bottle, not many people, unless it's the Tesla Tequila Lightning Bolt bottle, look at the bottle and say, I need to have that. Usually you have to draw them in. And so this is something that we've learned and we really preach with our partners. When you're trying to do new acquisition selling, you're trying to acquire a new customer, it's not look at my bottle, buy it. It's learn more about my brand, pull them into your website. Most importantly, capture their email address so you can continue that conversation. But ultimately, you need to put them through a series of learnings and education, have them be indoctrinated into the brand, and then and only then will they likely be willing to purchase your product. And so that's something that's really important when you're running advertisements. It's not, hey, $50, buy this bottle. It's, hey, we're this craft, really unique product. Click here to learn more.
Do you have statistics on how many touch points, the average amount of touch points it takes to trigger a sale?
I've always read it's usually 7 to 9. I haven't looked into that recently in our data set, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhat similar. Hey, maybe even that first ad you don't click on. Then that second ad, you click on it, you go to the website, and maybe that's it. And then maybe you get a third ad and you go back to the website, you give your email address, you get a couple of those newsletters, you learn more about the founder, about the distillery, the way it's produced. Then you're hooked. You want to try it, you buy your first bottle. And for example, with WhistlePig, they are trying to sell the Piggyback, which is their entry-level product for $49.99. But then they have an 18-year-old reserve with Simon Pierce cocktail glasses for $4.99. And so you come in, maybe you buy a bottle for $50, you fall in love with the brand, and then you keep coming back for more. And a lot of our partners are starting to get into merchandise because much more lifestyle than people have ever realized in the past. So why so many brands have succeeded online outside of the alcohol industry, it's because it's a lifestyle. You really identify with a brand and their mission or whatever they stand for. And in the alcohol industry, we're seeing that finally. We're seeing people fall in love with brands and want to represent it on a hat or on a t-shirt or buy cocktail kits or anything and everything that these distilleries can put out there. And so it's about building a robust brand and a robust store.
That's great advice. As far as brands, so what are you drinking? It doesn't have to be something on the Speakeasy platform. What brands are you drawn to these days?
I would say I always like to share my favorite cocktail is a spicy traditional mezcal sour.
Ooh,
so
yum.
You have the sour with egg white, but instead of with a bourbon, I like it with mezcal and then some spicy bitters in there. That's my go-to cocktail, but I'm actually very rarely drinking a cocktail these days. I mean, you almost always drinking straight spirits. It was something that I didn't do previously, but now that I've been exposed to really premium craft products, you don't need to mix it with any cocktail ingredients. The spirits are so unique and bold and flavorful that I really want to enjoy them on their own. So going back to my favorite cocktail, mezcal is my spirit of choice. Second would be tequila. And one of our new partners, Mezcal Vago, has some really unique mezcals. Highly recommend checking them out. And then on the tequila side, a very affordable tequila, I'm a Reposado guy, is Nosotros tequila. Their Reposado, I think, is about $45. You can get it online. They are on our platform, full disclosure, so a bit biased, but that's one of my go-to tequilas on the rocks with a lime. Absolutely delicious.
That's great. I'm going to definitely try that mezcal sour. Now, I'm a big fan of bitters. You mentioned a spicy bitter. What's your favorite bitter?
Are you familiar with firewater bitters, Joe?
No, but I need to be.
Oh my God. If you like spice, careful, you might burn your mouth the first time. Got to get some firewater bitters. And so in the mezcal sour, you put a couple drops of the firewater bitters and it'll really heat that cocktail right up.
So give us the recipe so we can make it.
Yeah. So usually you're doing 2 ounces of mezcal, and then you'll do egg white. You'll have a little bit of simple syrup, a little bit of lime juice. And so that'll be your base. And then usually I'm throwing in some of those firewater bitters as well.
Then shake it and strain it into a tulip glass?
Yeah, exactly. So you shake it, and then I usually serve it in a coupe. And so you make sure that you're shaking with ice, shake it very vigorously, especially with the egg white. And then what comes out in the coupe is this really rich, foamy, velvety cocktail. Absolutely beautiful.
Delicious. Well, it's noon here, so it's almost time. I might
I'll join you.
This. So as we wrap up, I mean, would you like to give a shout out to anybody?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to the WhistlePick team. Jeff Kozak, the CEO there, really done absolutely incredible things with that brand. They're one of the most inspirational independent brands. They're not owned by one of the major suppliers, portfolio companies. They are just shaking up the industry. And what I absolutely love about WhistlePick is their focus on rare, premium, limited releases. So this focus on premiumization and craft and local has been very visible across industries for a while now. And WhistlePick's doing an excellent job bringing it to the alcohol space. And it just so happens that selling those sorts of products is really best lived online. And so keep an eye on WhistlePick's website, sign up for their newsletter. They're rolling out their Sasquatch series and a whole bunch of other really unique single barrels and limited time offerings that you can't find in most liquor stores. And that's keeping demand very high for their products. And they're absolutely incredible. So highly recommend getting your first bottle.
Oh, fantastic. So Josh, where can people learn more about you and Speakeasy?
Best way to find out more about Speakeasy is go to our website, speakeasyco.com. We also are on social media, so you can follow us on social media. And I myself or on social media, LinkedIn, reach out, say hello. And if you want to reach out by email, josh@speakeasyco.com. Don't be shy. Looking forward to connecting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh, for being on.
Thank you, Drew.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Looking forward to coming back on.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.